I got that for got a pack of 10 for $5 on Amazon. Did you guess what book I read? In case you didn't already read the title of this video, I read Dracula by Bram Stoker. From my knowledge, it's like the first really iteration of Dracula, like the Count Dracula. You know the one. You've heard of him, right? Hotel Transylvania, right? Special shout out to the version I got. I thrifted it. The cover design is by Robert Matthias, and look at that. Anyway, you guys know the drill. I read a book. I'm going to talk about it. Usually in the past videos, I try to like avoid spoilers, but this time I'm just going to talk more about the story and stuff. Even though I'm going to talk about what happened, and that's kind of a spoiler, you can't truly spoil the entire experience until you read the book yourself. So I'm going to give away some spoilers, some stuff about the story and whatnot. But first and foremost, I recommend it because it's a classic, and I don't want to sound like an illiterate fool by talking about how this book was not good. It was good. No, seriously, it was good, I swear. So actually, whatever, let's just jump into it. I'm gonna be honest, I feel like really the best part of the book is kind of the beginning. And I will say, so the book is it's a collection of journals of these people that interact with Dracula. I really don't like journal entries. That's probably like my least favorite kind of book, but I feel like in this case it was very effective. The reason I don't like it is because it's like, who has the time to be sitting around and journaling every instance that you come across, and then how are you able to repeat what someone says word for word? That just, it's not realistic to me. I feel like a journal entry, it always has to be one person's perception of their world, and if they're going to repeat what someone had told them, it's going to be biased in some way or another. Like, how are you going to write down word for word what someone says, especially in this book when it's like, I'll just say here and now, the dialogue is really long because everyone is so emotional, so they talk on and on and on about a lot of stuff. In this, it's very effective because no one totally understands that like this Dracula guy is a vampire. No one really gets what vampires are, so you're discovering as the reader what they're going through, and you're kind of putting the pieces together as they are. So I feel like that's really effective. And I also, it seems like, I'm going to be honest, reading through it, seems like the characters aren't doing much, so it kind of justifies how they're able to just kind of sit around and write in their journal, because it seems like not a lot is happening. Let's go back to the beginning, which I feel like was partially kind of the best part of the book. So you're following along this guy, Jonathan Harker, as he is traveling to Transylvania to meet Count Dracula. And he sees Dracula as this normal guy, which is crazy because I would not see him as some normal guy when he's pale white and he's got sharp teeth and he's got like super red lips. Everything about him is so off-putting. But like I said, it's really effective. As you're reading through his journal entry, you are discovering things about Dracula as he is. So he's starting to discover like Dracula doesn't eat, he doesn't seem to sleep, and then this one time Jonathan is like spying on Dracula and he sees him crawl on the side of the wall, like on this 90-degree wall. He is crawling on the side to leave the mansion that they're in, because Dracula has Jonathan trapped inside a mansion. That's another part I really like, is how like Jonathan is slowly starting to realize that he's trapped there and that he can't escape, and the one opportunity he has to escape, he doesn't want to take it. And then the one opportunity he has to explore around, it's like not a good situation. What happens? What I really like about the beginning as well is how it totally leaves you at a cliffhanger. So then after the fact, once Jonathan like really makes this realization that, wow, he's trapped here with this freak Dracula. And something else I actually forgot to mention, I really like Jonathan's trek to Transylvania to Count Dracula's mansion. First off, Jonathan does a really good job, as he describes in his journal, just what an exhausting journey it was, like how it feels like it's just dragging on, and it's like feels exhaustive, which I feel like there's another part at the end of the book that does that really well, where as you're reading through, you're exhausted, and it really replicates what the characters are going through as they're going on this journey. As Jonathan is traveling, all these small towns that he passes by, all the locals are gifting him stuff like crucifix and like garlic garlands to like wear around his neck and stuff. And I really like that, because then it shows like the townspeople know that something's up. They don't, like, they're not outright saying, like, don't go to Count Dracula because he is a vampire and he will suck your blood. They're not saying anything like that. Like, maybe Dracula is more of a fable to them, but they still believe that he's powerful and they have their duty is to protect this traveler since he's going there. So they want to offer any sort of support they can. I love those little details in it. After, though, Jonathan Harker is stuck, makes that realization. We're left on this cliffhanger, and then we jump to Mina Harker, which at the beginning of the book, it's not Mina Harker because they're not married yet. They get married later, but I can't remember what her maiden name was. So just Mina, though, she's one of the other main characters. We have Jonathan, Mina, and Dr. Stewart. I think those are kind of the main characters. So Mina, she's talking about her relationship with her best friend Lucy and talking about how much she misses Jonathan and how they're soon to be married and she can't wait for him to come back and his journey is taking a really long time. Meanwhile, she's back at home. I think they're in London and she's talking about just what's going on with her and Lucy is like sleepwalking, and that's something I don't want to give away is what happens to Lucy. She's like semi a main character, but what happens to her is really important for you to discover like what's going on with the vampires. So again, I don't want to talk too much about it because it would give it away, but I really love that part of the book as well, where everything with Lucy goes down, and then Van Helsing or Van Halsling, I hope I'm going to say his name right, where he's introduced as well, and Dr. Stewart, we get to know more about the two of them and their interactions with Lucy and I. And I just want to say, I love how Mina writes about Lucy and how the two of them, like, we get to read some of their letters back and forth, and it is so wholesome and sweet. They are so close. They're so I just love them so much. As I was reading the book, I texted my best friend Danielle because we are tight like that too, and I'm like, this is us. We are Mina and Lucy right now. Like, literally, we are Mina and Lucy. I love them. Anyway, like I said, we're introduced to Dr. Stewart and Van Helsing. And Van Helsing knows so much about vampires, but we never understand really why, unless I just missed it, unless I really am illiterate and I just don't know how to read context clues or anything like that. But I feel like it's just not written out for us how or why Van Helsing seems to know so much about these creatures or about the undead, as they call them, which undead is a really good word not enough people use to describe vampires, because to become a vampire you kind of die, but then you're undead. So, and you know what would have fixed the whole predicament with him knowing so much about vampires but we don't understand why? Is if he had more journal entries. All of the journal entries are Jonathan Harker, Mina, and Dr. Stewart. And like we get very little from Van Helsing, even though he's kind of one of the main characters as well. And it would have made so much sense if he would have more journal entries and he would start to be like, oh, this reminds me of this one time, blah, 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 blah. But I mean, he does travel there to London, so we know he's not from there, I don't think, and he's older too. So I mean, that is kind of evidence enough that he has seen or been through something that should give him like the upper hand or give him more context as to what they're dealing with. Let's jump ahead. We get Jonathan's interaction at the mansion. Then we have Mina and Lucy, and we're introduced to Dr. Stewart and then Van Helsing. And then Jonathan comes back, which I thought he was dead, and I feel like that would have been really effective, but no, he's alive. He comes back after Mina nurses him back to health, and she reads his journal entries and she's like, what is this? Oh my gosh. And then she starts comparing like his entries to what happened to Lucy, and now they're putting together, oh my gosh, it's vampires, we're dealing with vampires. After that, it gets a little boring, I'm gonna be super honest. There isn't really a lot happening. There's just a lot of them, I guess, kind of like planning or analyzing what's going on. But that just, like I said, it just gets really boring really fast, and they don't do as much as you wish they would. It feels more like they're talking so much about doing stuff and not actually doing stuff. So anyway, Dr. Stewart, by the way, let's talk about him for a second. Probably my favorite character. And he is the doctor. He runs this sort of madhouse. So he's got patients that are insane and whatnot. And he's got this one patient that we focus on throughout the book. Another critique of mine, we don't really get any explanation as to what happened to him. So this guy, he likes to catch flies so that he can catch spiders, so that he can catch birds, to eventually catch cats, and then hopefully catch dogs. But he also eats bugs and spiders. And I mean, he's clearly unwell, but his character is kind of all over the place and we don't get enough context as to why, I believe. Like there's supposed to be some sort of hint that he's a vampire or like vampire adjacent, but then I'll spoil it, he dies. And that was kind of unfulfilling. Like it didn't really make much sense why he died. I think it was supposed to I think maybe the book was trying to imply that perhaps he was a vampire or he knew about vampires and then Dracula killed him because he was going to disclose too much about Dracula. I mean, seriously, there's not enough to go off there. Unless again, like I totally misread the book. I don't know. But this is what I'm, blah, blah, blah. We get then to the conclusion. And I personally hate the trope in horror movies where super normal people and then big scary monster and then super normal people, they defeat the scary monster and they grow and they're stronger afterwards and then they just go on to live life as normal because they're like, and this is just a regular horror trope that I see all the time. And then they never talk about it, or it's like it stays just between them. It's like, this is just us, we have to keep this a secret, we can't let anyone know, but now we're just gonna go on and live our lives and people will never know that we're heroes because we defeated this big scary monster. And that's kind of what happens. So, well, spoiler, they kill and defeat Count Dracula. And I feel like that was, again, one of the best parts, aside from the very beginning, Jonathan Harker's experience at Dracula's mansion. Aside from that, one of the best parts was at the end, as Van Helsing and Mina are traveling to the mansion. And that, again, does a really good job at like, oh, you feel exhausted. Like you understand their struggle and their travel. Like it's really hard and treacherous as they're traveling to Transylvania and all this. But then there's this really dumb part, I'm just gonna say as well, where Van Helsing, like, he leaves Mina at the makeshift camp, and then he goes to the mansion and he kills these other vampires, and then he just comes back. And it was like very quick. And that's what I don't like, is like throughout the book, things are kind of really drawn out. And then the end, it's just one right after another. And that makes sense because that's, as a journal entry, it's probably a really accurate retelling of how it happened. Like maybe it took a long time, but then at the end, like things happened so fast. But just from a storytelling point of view, that was kind of frustrating. It was kind of frustrating, but I really liked the end, and I liked how they took down Dracula. I thought that was kind of cool, and it made sense, except for when that one guy died. So anyway, it's not just Mina and Van Helsing that are going after Dracula. It's Mina, Van Helsing, Dr. Stewart, Jonathan, and these two other guys, Arthur and Murray. Their names are kind of Goldaming or whatever. I'm losing their names, but all six of them are though after Dracula, and again, one of them dies, and it's kind of like, okay, it's like again it's just a kind of an overused trope where why did you feel the need to just kill off that character? If it was going to be brutal, then more people should have been wounded, more people should have probably died. Like it should have been a harsher battle. For him to just go off and die made no sense. The thing is though, with the tropes that are in Dracula, you can't really criticize them because this book is so freaking old. It's from 1897, I think it was published, 1898. So, I mean, it's an old book, and I'm sure for the time it was like totally insane to read something like this, and you're like, oh my gosh, what the freak? And for that, I definitely really appreciate it, especially when you see overused tropes in an older book like this. You understand, like, wow, this book had a really big impact on all this media that we have today. And that is partially why I like to read old books. Even though it's frustrating to be like, oh, I've seen that so many times, you're like, oh, but it comes from this. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. That's kind of the whole story, I'm going to be honest. I didn't really give away much spoilers at all. I feel like you should definitely still go and read it, because there is a huge part of a book and a story is the experience of reading each individual word and feeling each emotion that the characters elicit and that the actions and what takes place. Like it you are imagining it in your head and all these intricate little details. So the whole experience within itself, I want to read the book again because I feel like there's a lot I missed, but I wasn't super totally into it. There were a lot of parts I really liked, but it's not like the entire time I was on the edge of my seat, like excited to pick back up the book like other books I've read. I want to talk about as well just other little things sprinkled through it, but you know what? My room is so dark all of a sudden. It's 2 p.m. Let me just turn on some lights. That looks good. Some of my favorite parts of the book. And I hate to talk about this, but I can't talk about Dracula without bringing it up. If you happen to have watched JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, the similarities between that TV show, that franchise, and Bram Stoker's Dracula is, I don't know how to put it into words, I'm going to be so honest, but I feel like the creator of JoJo's has to have read Bram Stoker's Dracula, absolutely, and if he hasn't, makes no sense at all. Because, and I understand part of anime is like the really dramatic gestures and emotions and dialogue and stuff, but that is a huge part of this book, is the people, the men especially, they are super, super dramatic and emotional, which I kind of like. And it's like a lot of times it's really sweet, like especially how all these men, the other men that go with Mina and Jonathan to defeat Dracula, that like they're super admirable and they're super kind, and but they just kind of talk a lot about how they feel, and they're like, "Oh, Mina, you have the heart of a woman and the mind of a man," and it's whatever. Anyway, it's just, I feel there's so many different similarities. And then also, like I said, just with how dramatic the characters in JoJo's can be, it's partially anime. It's partially like there has to be inspiration from this book. I see no other explanation. So that's kind of critique, but then also something I liked. Another something I can point out about the book is they often refer to God and they often pray. Like not super, super often, but it's definitely a theme throughout the book. It's a sign of the times, definitely. When you do that, it goes in two directions. And with this book, they defeated the big scary horror monster, right? So then a part of you almost like, what? So it was equated to God and praying to God because they did that, they were protected by God, and because of that they won? Or if they lose against this big scary monster, then it shows like this sense of hopelessness, and it shows like, wow, even God can't control this monstrosity that's been unleashed on humanity. And like, I think that's powerful in stories, but it's also kind of an overused trope. Like it's just when you bring God into it, there's such a specific way to do it right, I feel. Even like they pray to God for strength and all this, and then they win against Dracula, and it's just like, so what, you're gonna equate that to your prayers? I'm Christian. Like I've got my cross tattooed on me in case a vampire tries to suck my blood. I'm good. I've got a tattoo and everything. Maybe I need to tattoo a rosary as well. Every critique you would have of this book kind of becomes invalid when you look at the times it was written in and you look at everything else that was going on. I mean, this is English literature. Like I said, as of my knowledge, this is really the first iteration of the Dracula that we know. And I really like all the different lore that is brought up about vampires. It's lore that I feel isn't used enough today when we bring up vampires and vampire characters. Like how Dracula doesn't only shapeshift into a bat, he can also shapeshift into a wolf, and he can like control wolves, and he can shapeshift into like fog and stuff. I don't see that enough in media. And also, they have, you know, if you've seen Interview with a Vampire, you know how to turn someone into a vampire, you need to suck their blood till they're on the verge of death, and then as a vampire, the person has to suck your blood to like give them life back. Does that make sense? Okay, so you get the human that's on the verge of death, and then the vampire, and the human has to drink the vampire's blood, and then they turn into a vampire. And that, of course, I feel like is the best way to be turned into a vampire. I don't like all this BS where it's like you get bit, like you just get bit on the neck, and then you're a vampire. I don't know where that came from. I don't know why people still use that. And they even show that there's even a scene where it shows Dracula turning someone into a vampire. And I think the book also does a really good way because there are two instances in which we see people turn into vampires, and I won't say who those people are, but it does a really good job at kind of showing the transformation, especially since it's like it's not super obvious, but it shows them kind of dying and then coming back to life as the vampire. There's this one instance where Dr. Stewart and Van Helsing are doing everything they can to save this person that's being turned into a vampire. And at the end, they can't save them, but they're doing like these blood transfusions because this person is losing all the, like, they keep seeming to lose blood, and then they die, and then they're a vampire, and then they kill the vampire, and maybe I'll just leave it on that. So those are the things I liked about the book and the things I wasn't super into. It's definitely a book I would like to reread, and I really want to watch, even though this doesn't even sound that attractive to me. But there is a movie featuring Keanu Reeves, which I'm kind of indifferent about him. And that one chick, you know the one, Winona Ryder. Winona Ryder. I didn't want to have to look it up, so I had to think about it for a second. So it featured the two of them, and it's supposed to be like the most accurate retelling of Bram Stoker's Dracula. So maybe I'll watch that. Maybe I'll pirate it. Just kidding. I don't pirate stuff. But if you need a site, I can hook you up. So, thank you for watching, and, just whatever, uh, so, I want to suck your blood.